the missing woman case that exposed a double life. She didn't just disappear. She vanished from two lives at once. To some people, she was reliable, predictable, the kind of person who never just goes silent. But to others, she was someone else entirely, different routines, different circles, different secrets, and no one realized those worlds even existed until the day she went missing. At first, it seemed like a standard disappearance. No signs of struggle, no clear reason to leave. But the deeper investigators looked, the more things stopped making sense, because the woman everyone thought they knew was only half the story. And what they uncovered next didn't just change the case, it changed who she really was. At first, nothing about her disappearance triggered immediate panic. She had routines, yes, but she also had independence. She moved through her days without needing to report every detail to anyone. So when calls went unanswered and messages stayed unread, it didn't instantly raise alarms. People assumed she was busy. Maybe she needed space. Maybe she'd gone somewhere for a short break. But then hours turned into a full day. And then another. That's when concern shifted into something else, because this wasn't like her. She didn't miss important commitments. She didn't disappear without explanation. The silence felt wrong, not dramatic, not chaotic, just out of place. And sometimes, that's the first real sign that something isn't right. When a missing persons report was finally filed, investigators approached it like many others. They started with the basics: her last known location, her recent activity, the people she had been in contact with. At first, everything seemed ordinary. Her home showed no signs of forced entry. Nothing appeared disturbed. There were no obvious clues suggesting a struggle. It didn't look like someone had been taken, which raised a different question. Did she leave on her own? Her phone records became one of the first key pieces of the puzzle. Calls, messages, app activity, digital footprints that could reveal her movements and state of mind. Initially, the data painted a calm picture. No urgent messages, no signs of distress. But then something unusual appeared. There were gaps, periods of time where her activity didn't align with what people close to her believed her routine to be. Moments where her phone connected to locations that didn't quite make sense based on her known schedule. It wasn't dramatic, but it was inconsistent. And inconsistency is where investigations begin to shift direction. As detectives expanded their timeline, they started speaking to more people, not just close family and friends, but acquaintances, coworkers, anyone who might have interacted with her in the days leading up to her disappearance. That's when the first crack appeared. Two different accounts of her life didn't match. To one group, she had a stable routine, predictable hours, familiar places she visited regularly, someone grounded, consistent, easy to understand. But to another group, she lived differently, different locations, different habits, even different ways of presenting herself. At first, investigators considered the possibility of simple misunderstanding. People perceive others differently. It's normal. But the more they dug, the harder it became to ignore. These weren't just variations in perspective. They were two distinct versions of the same person, and neither group knew about the other. That realization changed everything, because now, this wasn't just a missing person case. It was a case involving a hidden life. Detectives began reconstructing her movements with this new understanding. Places that once seemed irrelevant suddenly became important. Contacts that didn't appear significant now had context. And slowly, a pattern started to emerge. She had been carefully managing two separate worlds, keeping them from overlapping, maintaining distance between them. It wasn't accidental. It was deliberate, which raised a critical question. Why? What was she trying to keep hidden? And more importantly, did that hidden life have anything to do with her disappearance? As investigators followed this new path, they realized something even more unsettling. The version of her life that had been hidden, it was the one that led closest to the truth. Once investigators shifted their focus to the hidden side of her life, the entire case took on a different shape. What once looked like a quiet, unexplained disappearance now felt layered, intentional, structured, and possibly connected to something she had been trying to keep separate. They began retracing her movements again, this time through the lens of both identities. Locations that had seemed random before now aligned with a second routine. A different set of places she visited, different times she was active, different people she interacted with. And those people, they became crucial, unlike her primary circle. Family, close friends, co-workers. This second group knew a version of her that no one else did. Conversations were different. Her behavior was different. Even the way she spoke about her life didn't match what investigators had already been told. It wasn't just a secret. It was a fully constructed alternate life. As detectives interviewed individuals from this second circle, the tone of the case began to shift again. Some described her as cautious. Others said she was more spontaneous, even unpredictable. And a few hinted that she might have been under some kind of pressure, though no one could clearly explain what that meant. That detail stood out. Pressure doesn't exist without a source, so investigators pushed deeper. Financial records were reviewed, transactions mapped out, and that's when another layer surfaced. Small inconsistencies at first, but enough to raise questions. Unexplained expenses, movements of money that didn't align with her known lifestyle, connections to places and services that didn't fit the version of her life everyone believed in. Individually, none of it proved anything, but together, it painted a picture of someone navigating more than just two identities. She was balancing something, possibly something risky, and that's when the timeline of her disappearance became critical. The last confirmed moments of her activity, calls, messages, location pings, placed her firmly within this second world, not near her usual environment, not around the people who first reported her missing. She had stepped fully into the life no one knew about, and then she disappeared. No messages after that, no confirmed sightings, no activity, just silence. But unlike the early days of the investigation, this silence now had context. It wasn't random, it was connected. Investigators narrowed their focus to the individuals she had last been in contact with in that hidden circle. Interviews became more detailed. Timelines were compared more aggressively, and inconsistencies began to surface again, this time not in her story but in theirs. One person in particular stood out. Their account of the last interaction didn't fully align with digital evidence. The timing was slightly off. Details were vague where they should have been clear. At first, it seemed minor, but when cross-referenced with other data, it became harder to ignore. That individual had been one of the last known people to see her. And now, they were the one with the most unanswered questions. Surveillance and deeper background checks followed. Investigators looked into their history, their connection to her, and any possible motive that might explain what happened. And while nothing was immediately obvious, the pressure began to build. Because cases like this don't usually break with one big reveal. They break slowly. Through contradictions, through details that don't hold up, through moments where the truth starts to slip. Eventually, that pressure reached a point where the narrative couldn't stay intact anymore. What had been presented as a normal interaction began to unravel, and when it did, the reality was far from what anyone had imagined at the beginning of the case. Her disappearance wasn't a mystery in the way it first appeared. It was the result of something that happened within that hidden world, something that escalated, something that wasn't meant to happen the way it did. The double life she had been living, it wasn't just a secret, it was the key to everything. And in the end, it led investigators exactly where they needed to look. For her family, the truth brought a complicated kind of closure, because while answers are important, they don't always bring comfort. Sometimes they raise even more questions about the choices someone made, the risks they took, and the parts of their life that were never fully understood. But at least now, there was no more wondering, no more searching in the dark. Just the truth, finally uncovered. If this story made you realize how much can exist beneath the surface, how someone can live two lives without anyone noticing, then you're starting to see these cases the way investigators do. Because not every secret is obvious, and not every life is what it seems. If you want more real stories, deeper breakdowns, and cases that go beyond the headlines, make sure you like this video, share it with someone who loves true crime, and subscribe to the channel, because the next story might be hiding more than it shows.